Welcome to GoPowerCat.com's Friday Shoot-Around, sponsored by Riverbank Brewing. Now, let's head into the studio.
Welcome in here to the Friday Shoot-Around. As always, I'm Ryan Gilbert. We are joined by Clint Stewart, former Kansas State guard. The Cats have won 6 in a row, Clint. It's been a lot of fun. You know, this is a team that obviously had lost 6 in a row, and now they're on a hot winning streak. We'll break down kind of the good here over the last couple of games, but more specifically just the Arizona win. As for those that didn't see, Clint was part of our our Monday show, The Insiders, live on Go Power Cat. If you missed it, you can check that out as well. We broke down a lot of that KU game. But Clint, before we get into Arizona, man, the 6-game winning streak, you know, we have never seen really anything like this in college basketball where a team can turn things around like the way that Kansas State has.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't think we've ever seen something like this where a team was basically, you know, left for dead, right, and just not playing well, and 1-6 in the conference, and then 6 wins overall, 7 wins overall, and turning it around to what we've been able to do, and not only that, but just beating some of the teams that we've beaten, and also going and winning on the road at Iowa State, beating KU at home, it's just beating Arizona at home. I mean, it's just amazing, and it's something that. If you would have said, hey, we beat KU and Iowa State, and maybe lost to Arizona, or we beat KU and Arizona, lost to Iowa State, I mean, you'd still say this has been a great turnaround, right? I mean, and so to win all 3 of those games, plus win the games that you'd say were a little bit more favorable for us. I mean, it's just been it's something to be written about almost. And so hats off to Coach Tang and the players just sticking together, because when you go through a stretch of losing the games that we lost and not playing well, it becomes really, really tough to keep players locked in and keep their crazy faith, right, that, hey, we can turn this around, and players start getting down and like, oh, this is just who we are, right, and you get into practice and they maybe don't practice as hard, and you really got to find ways to continue to motivate them to keep that faith that, hey, we can turn this around. And so hats off to the coaching staff, just keeping the players locked in, and then the players showing up every single day and saying, hey, we know we haven't played well, but this doesn't define our season, and this isn't who we are, and we're going to turn this around. And what you're seeing is, I mean, guys are just playing tremendous. Doug McDaniel's playing tremendous right now. Ultimate confidence. Hawkins tremendous. Gasson tremendous. And other guys are filling in around them. And so it's kind of what we mentioned. We expected to see. Now when I say, hey, we expect to go win. We're going to go win 6 games in a row. We're going to beat Iowa State and KU and Arizona. I'd say I don't know if anyone would expect that. Even if we're playing at our best all season. But it's just been amazing to see these guys come together and be able to do that.
In K-State's, it's been 7 wins, obviously, in conference. Everyone's asking me, whether that's somebody that's just one of my friends, like what the heck happened to K-State basketball, or it's a subscriber on Go Power Cat. What happened to this team? Is there one thing that you can pinpoint that's just been so much different in the games that they've won and the games that Kansas State has lost?
Yeah, and I think, the turnaround in the conference, we've started defending. And if you look at, where we were in our 6 losses versus our 7 wins, I mean, it's almost been a complete flip of the script, where we were giving up about 75 points and scoring about 64 a game in those losses, and our wins is just the opposite. We're scoring about 74 and giving up 63. And so I think what you really see is, one, defensively, I think our intensity and focus has really stepped up. There's not as many breakdowns defensively. Guys seem to be on the same page, which has been really good. And then offensively, we found our rhythm. I think Doug McDaniel, the ball is starting to flow through him. He's getting some mismatches where early on in the season, a big would switch on. Hawkins' man might switch on him. You have a big on him and maybe a guard on Hawkins. He would throw it back to Coleman and let Coleman try to go work one-on-one. And now Doug is saying, hey, I have the ball. I have the mismatch. I'm going to create, whether that's for myself or for someone else. And that's what he's best at doing, And so you just see him having a lot more confidence in himself. Obviously coaches having confidence in him, freedom to just go make plays. And you're seeing the fruits of that, And so offensively, we've gotten better. Defensively, we've gotten a lot better. We're shooting, just give you a stat, over these last 6 games, we're shooting 48% from the field. and 38 from three. And then that includes the 1 for 19 against Arizona from three. If you take that out, we were shooting about 43% from three. And then we're holding our opponents to 41% from the field and 28% from three. So that's a big disparity. You talk about 7%, 7% points basically on field goals and 10% points on threes. I mean, that's a big disparity. Just shows you how well we're playing.
You mentioned the defense, 17 turnovers for Arizona on Tuesday, 14 steals, for Kansas State. That's no fluke when you're able to force that many turnovers.
Yeah. And if you breaking down this game, if you looked at everything else, you would have said we lost this game. I mean, if you look at we shot 1 for 19 from three. Now, Arizona shot 2 for 22, so they weren't much better. But 1 for 19 from three. We got out-rebounded by 13. We had 9 assists to 10 turnovers. You would say this is a game we lost. But then you look at it, and we had 14 steals. I mean, our defense just turned it up on Arizona, and that created 23 turnovers, points off turnovers. Right. And so those 23 points from turnovers versus Arizona's 10 was the difference in the game. And so hats off to our defense, even when it doesn't look like it. If I was just looking at the stats, I would have said, okay, this team probably lost. Our defense really did a great job to keep us in the game and obviously allow us to win in the end. I tweeted out, I don't know if it's tweeted or X'd out or how you say it now, but I tweeted out, during the game, there's 3:29 left. And there's a timeout because Max Jones kind of turned the basketball over and then got it back, and then the refs weren't sure if it should have been a reset of the shot clock. And I tweeted out at that point in time, I said, this would be a really perfect time for us to get a kill. And a kill is 3 stops in a row. And so, just coincidentally now, we had the ball. Doug comes down. We get a step-up screen where Doug comes off the step-up screen. He scores it. That puts us tied at 62-62. The very next possession, they go down. And Doug gets hit by a screen pretty hard, kind of gets taken out of the play, and we're playing 5-on-4. And Hawkins stops the basketball. They kick it across the court. They then try to lob it inside. Hawkins stops the basketball, then sprints back and tips the ball at the rim on the lob to get the steal. Right, and that was just I thought that was probably one of the biggest plays of the game, given the situation and then just the time and the score. We then go back down, another step-up ball screen. Doug gets a one-on-one mismatch against a big, scores it, right? Come back down. Arizona misses a 3. It gets tipped out of bounds. That was our second stop, okay? And then we go down and score again off of brilliant set play by Coach Tang, get a back screen from Hazen. I think we've mentioned on this podcast, when you're a shooter, everyone thinks like shooting is your best asset. I think it's screening. Because if you screen, people they have to help. And if they don't, we're going to get wide open layups. And so Hazen sets a great screen for Gasson. He gets a layup. And then the following play, they call timeout and come out of timeout. Moby gets a steal and a dunk. And so we get our 3 stops in a row. It goes from 3:29 down to about 1:39 or so. So 2 minutes in the trenches of the game that Arizona could not score. That was the basketball game, and I know they kind of made it interesting late, but that was it. That was the game. We won the game in those 2 minutes at the end.
We've talked about this before. The 3-point, kind of the magic number for 3-pointers attempted in a game is around 20. And Kansas State was abysmal from beyond the arc. But if Kansas State's chucking up 26, 27 threes in this game, they lose.
I 100% agree. We went 1 for 19. I'm glad it wasn't 1 for 27, and so we did a really good job of scoring the ball in the paint. I think from 2, we shot like maybe 60-something% from 2, 63% from 2. And then, like I said, 1 of 19 from 3 combined. Both teams, us and Arizona, shot 7% from 3. I don't know if I've seen a game like that either, given how many shots we took from 3. But, like I said, I think we did a really good job of, when the shots weren't falling, we didn't just go shoot 30 of them, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And so we did a good job of putting pressure on the rim. You mentioned Doug getting to the rim, getting some layups, Gasson scoring inside to really just balance our game out. And that's why we won the game on the offensive side.
Earlier on, you said, Doug was tremendous and a number of guys were tremendous. But for Doug in particular, is there one area where Doug can even excel or get better right now? Or do you think that, not to take anything away from what he can do, but has he reached his ceiling? Or is there maybe one part of Doug's game that, if you're Coach Tang and the staff, you're challenging him, hey, keep going and keep working on this?
Yeah, I think he can still be a better shooter, from the outside on catch and shoot. And, I think he's a better shooter than what he's even been this year. As I look at his stats, I mean, he's shooting 27% from 3, 14 of 52, which I'd have to go back and look, but that's probably the lowest he's shot in his career from the outside. So I think he can be a better shooter. And with his quickness and his, ability to make plays, he still has to take care of the ball at times, but like I said, some of that flash is what makes him who he is. So you got to take some of the good with the bad there. But if he can shoot the basketball consistently from the outside, I mean, he almost becomes unguardable, because I'm 6'4". If I'm trying to guard him, and I had to guard a guy like Andrew Lavender, who played at Oklahoma for a year or two, then went to Xavier and played. And he was about 5'7", McDonald's All-American, and he was so quick. I mean, and at 6'4", I have to back up and give him space, and so Doug's kind of the same way. If I was guarding him, I'd have to back up and give him space, right? And so his ability to make the outside shot more consistently, just makes him even harder to guard, because now that guard has to press up on him, and you can't stand, if you're guarding him that close, you can't stay in front of him. He's too quick, and so just continue to work on his outside shot and become more consistent there.
Starting five, has been great in this winning streak. And, I know Coleman Hawkins, after rewatching the game here this afternoon, Coleman Hawkins didn't have a good game. Hazen didn't really get going from beyond the arc. And, I know David Gasson was in foul trouble, but by and large, just starting five has been good in the winning streak. Wasn't necessarily the case from top to bottom on Tuesday against Arizona. When you have Moby making kind of the play of the game with that steal and slam, like you talked about, and CJ Jones really providing a spark in the first half, 9 points before the break, that's a good way to take the weight off of that starting five shoulders.
Yeah, and that's what those guys have to do. I mentioned when their number is called, they got to be ready to play, and there's going to be different games where they're going to be called upon a little bit more than others. And just given the flow of the game and how teams are defending us, there's going to be games where they're going to find themselves with opportunity to score the basketball. They just have to be ready to score the basketball, right? And so CJ Jones is going to get some outside shots. He has to make sure he's ready to step up and make them, right? Or put it on the ground and get to the rim. It can't be a surprise, and then it ends up being a forced or just a bad shot because he wasn't ready for it, So if those guys can just stay ready when their number is called, there's going to be games where, Doug played tremendous. Obviously he took 22 shots, and there's going to be more other games where he's only going to shoot it, 10 times, right? Or Hawkins is going to play better, and so guys just have to be ready when their number's called. And if some of our starters are struggling, that gives that opportunity for someone off the bench like Moby, CJ Jones to come in and give us a spark in their role, right? And so it doesn't mean come off the bench and this is your time to try to go shine. It's like, no, shine in your role, and the ball will find you in your role, and then be ready to do what you need to do with the basketball in that situation.
You obviously know what it's like to beat Kansas. What can you say about the maturity of this team to, flush that one, move on, and focus on Arizona and win that game?
I'll tell you, it's one of the toughest things to do is win a big game at home, right? Crowd is behind you. Come on, you're in college, you go out that night, everyone's chanting, cheering, it's a good time, and getting over that emotional high and then coming right back and playing another top, 15 team, one of the best teams in the conference, and being able to come back and win is just, it's tremendous. I remember my senior year, we beat KU at home. It was, obviously fans rushed the floor, and it was amazing. And then we went the very next game, I think lost to maybe Missouri or someone, right? I mean, and it was just a game where it's like Missouri was bad that year, but coming off the emotional high, it's hard to kind of get locked back in and have that same get up for the next game, and so for our guys to be able to flush that, come back and beat another tremendous team that's going to be, I think Joe Lenardi had them as a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament going into the game the other night. And so to be able to beat them just shows the maturity of our guys, and to be able to be locked in and hey, this is the ride, man. We're in the middle of the season. It's the middle of the story, and the book's not closed. The book is still open. We had a couple rough chapters, to start the book, but every book has to start off like that to set the storyline, right? And so a couple rough chapters, and then now we're in the meat of the story, and it's getting real good, right? And we're like, okay, this is good, but we got to make sure now that we finish the book the way we want to finish it.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of those chapters here in just a minute after we take a break. But before we do, Clint, Kansas State went on a 13-0 run to end out the first half, and it's kind of a distant memory now, but early on in these Friday shoot-arounds in Big 12 play in December, right, we were talking about how important it was for K-State to not let its opponent go on its runs. And not only has Kansas State kind of shut down its opponents lately from going on runs, you're also seeing double-digit runs on offense from Kansas State, but obviously that's not a thing if you don't get stops on defense. And you mentioned kind of those kill shots, but going on runs is crucial in the Big 12.
It is, and to be able to go on runs at big times in the game as well, like end of the half type of deal. Obviously, end of the game is really big. Beginning of the game, to have those runs are really, really huge. But talk about at the end of the half, and when you go on a run at the end of the half, so then you go into halftime, and you have to kind of reset at halftime, but you feel good about yourself, right? I mean, like you feel like, okay, hey, we figured it out. All right, let's go, right? Versus the other team going on a run at the end of the half, and you're going in there like, uh-oh, hey, we got to make sure like that, we can turn this thing around. And so, being able to score the basketball in bunches and is really big in the Big 12. And then being able to stop teams from scoring the basketball in bunches is really big as well. And so hats off to our guys to be able to do that.
Any final thoughts from maybe just the 6-game winning streak as a whole or this Arizona game?
It's like I said, it's tremendous to see, in the 6-game winning streak, but, we're going to move on now to 2 games on the road. And then, we've won our last 2 games on the road, but, over the last year, it's been a place that we've struggled. So I think we just really got to make sure that, we don't allow these next 2 games to be trap games, as I call them, because you're playing against opponents that maybe don't have the same get up as the Arizona and the KU and the Iowa State. Right. And so we got to make sure that we come out ready to play from the beginning and act like, hey, it is Arizona, it is KU, and let's go get these wins.
Utah on Saturday and BYU on Monday. We'll break down both of these games after a quick break here on the Friday Shoot-Around.
It's time to take a break for our sponsors. We'll be back with more from GoPowerCat.com.
Nestled in the heart of beautiful and historic Council Grove, Kansas, Riverbank Brewing is the perfect place to stop before or after the game. Riverbank Brewing, located in downtown Council Grove.
Now let's head back to the show for more K-State sports coverage from GoPowerCat.com.
Clint, before we went to break, you mentioned the trap games, right? And I agree. Is there one of these in particular, nothing about the opponent and how good or bad, because obviously BYU is better than Utah, 100%. But after the winning streak, keeping it going out in Provo against BYU, is that tougher than keeping it going, win or lose? You got to have a quick memory if you win. Got to have a quick memory if you lose. Is there one of these games in particular, that I think would you label as more of a trap game?
Yeah, I think the Utah game is, and,
Okay.
and the reason I say that is, Utah is one of the more bottom teams in the Big 12. If we beat BYU, in Provo, obviously we'll feel really good about that, and then that makes that Utah game one that we maybe could overlook. I think if we lose to BYU, I think Utah is just a game where, being out there kind of that long and kind of just maybe ready to come back home, right? And maybe don't come out and play well after losing to BYU. So I think that can be, probably the bigger of the trap game. BYU is a good team. I think they obviously, as you mentioned, are better than Utah. I think they're going to finish kind of middle of the Big 12, and I think they'll be able to win some games here down the stretch. So, I think that should be a competitive game for us, win or lose. I think whatever happens, we're going to have to reset and make sure that we do not lose to Utah. You don't want to have a worse loss would be the Utah loss. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that'd be not great for the resume. I know it's not going to be killer if you lose away from home. You got to protect home court moving forward, though, Clint. And we talked about, you mentioned the chapters in the first half. Looking at the bigger picture before we kind of dive into this BYU game in terms of the matchups and stuff. But if you win this BYU game, Clint, your schedule is pretty dang favorable to go on a run and put yourself in a position to be on the bubble.
Yeah, it really is, and I mean, look, anything can happen, right? I mean, the Big 12 is the Big 12, and every game is tough. We're sitting here talking about, Utah should be an easier game and, like I said, a favorable schedule. But nothing is given. Everything is earned. And so, our guys are going to have to go earn every single win, whether it's on the road or at home. Got to make sure that we continue to take care of business and still have the mentality of 1-0, 1-0. What got this turnaround going was we weren't thinking about the tournament, right? The tournament wasn't even, it was out of reach. It wasn't even a thought. It was just, how can we get our second conference win, right? I mean, that was where we're at. All right, how can we get our third conference win? Like, how can we just feel good about ourselves that, like, we're out there, we're playing hard, and our Kansas State faithful are happy with the product that's on the floor, right? Like, that's where we were at. And so I think if we continue to just keep that mindset of 1-0, all right, we want to make sure that every time we step on the floor, we're giving our fans, our community, something to be proud of. Things will fall where they need to fall, and so hopefully the guys can continue to have that mindset.
K-State went to TCU on a Saturday and then had to go straight to Stillwater to play Oklahoma State on a Tuesday, I believe. And so that was a long trip, right? What can Kansas State, what can this team learn from that trip when it lost both games and, didn't have the best effort or energy or buy-in in that Oklahoma State game, as Jerome Tang said in the first half?
Well, I think, and then it's crazy how similar this is, right? I mean, I think that's where during that time I said, hey, the trap game is Oklahoma State, right? I mean, the TCU game was a tough game. It was when it came down to the wire. I think us against BYU I would bet it's going to come down to the wire. They play well at home. We're the hottest team in the country. And so I think it'll come down to the wire, and what ends up happening there, win or lose, we can't allow that to affect us going into Utah as we did losing to TCU in a close game by 1. And then it affected us with the energy that was needed to go in and compete and beat Oklahoma State on the road. And so it's a very similar situation. Hopefully our guys can learn from that and say, hey, here's what we did wrong, right? I mean, Coleman Hawkins, mentioned, we didn't have guys didn't warm up with energy. There was, like no one was ready to play, and so we can't have that kind of mentality, win or lose in Provo against BYU. We have to be ready to play. The first 5 minutes of the game to set the tone are really important. So hopefully guys can get some really good sleep in the hotel room the night before and be ready to come out and play really well.
If this does come down to the wire, like you're talking about, I think if you're a K-State fan, you probably feel a lot better if there's 2 minutes left and it's a tie game after what Kansas State has done as of late compared to some of those late game letdowns that we saw early on in conference play.
Yeah, I think definitely feel better. But I do think, being on the road is a lot different than being at home, and closing games out on the road are a lot different. Obviously, we did against Arizona State, which is really good, but we're going to have to really be locked in to close it out. Like, we didn't have to close the game out against Iowa State. Like, we were up, it was what it was, right? And so if it's close at the end of the game and being on the road and being able to execute offensively and being able to score in the last 5 minutes of the game where we've struggled, before this winning streak, I think that's going to be key for us. And as I mentioned, if we can get those 3 stops in a row and in the last 5 minutes, I mean, that could propel us to a victory. And so look for those things against the BYU. Can we get 3 stops in a row? Can we score the basketball efficiently in the last 5 minutes of the game? Look for Coach Tang to use his timeouts to get us a good shot, in the last 5 minutes of the game if it comes down to it. And hopefully our guys can execute.
Cougars like to shoot the basketball without a doubt. What sticks about BYU in your
I think you said it right. They shoot the basketball. They shoot actually half of their shots are threes, and so they've shot about 700 threes on the year and 1,400 total shots. So half of those, 50% of those shots are threes. They got 2 guys that shoot it at over 42%. They got 4 guys that have made 30 or more threes. We have 2. Those 2 are Brendan Hausen and actually Hausen might be our only one. Might have spoke a little too soon there. No, I'm sorry. Hausen and Max Jones has made over 30 as well. So we have 2 that made over 30 on the year. They have 4. So that tells you that they can score the ball in bunches, right? They can get hot from the outside. We're going to have to defend the 3-point line really well. We're going to have to obviously score it. I expect their crowd is usually one of the best crowds in the Big 12. I mean, they do chants and really have the atmosphere rocking. And so we're going to have to, feed off of their crowd's energy, let that fuel us to shut them up and play well. And if we do that, guard the 3-point line, like I said, and continue to play like we've been playing. We have the blueprint now. It's like, don't deviate from the blueprint. Here's the blueprint. It's proved itself successful. Continue to do these things.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting out there too in the fall against BYU in football. Those fans are passionate, and they're not they're not hostile. They're nice people, and
yep.
I think they want a good, clean game both ways. But maybe not a trick question, Clint, but this is Kansas State's first time playing BYU, and obviously Utah, we'll talk about in a second. But it's pretty self-explanatory. The pros are they don't know your tendencies, but the cons are maybe you don't know their tendencies. Do you think this sets up in a good way or a bad way, or is it just kind of a wash with Kansas State not knowing necessarily how to attack BYU, having played them already this year? I know they've got a first-year coach as well.
Yeah. And so, it is all going to be new. And another thing, too, is usually, and then the mountains might be a little bit of altitude that, might take your breath out of you a little bit. And so, but I don't think, one way or another, whether advantage or disadvantage, we have to approach it just like every single game. And I know the coaching staff has a scouting report, from a defensive standpoint of what we have to do. And so our guys just have to be locked into executing defensively. And then offensively, look for our mismatches, get up, push the basketball, get Hawkins in the post, let him play out of that, right? Have Hausen setting screens and finding open space to get shots, and just continue to play together offensively, and I think we'll be fine. But normally in these type of games, I think, can we execute defensively and against a team that we have not played? It kind of reminds me of, when we played Drake, we didn't execute defensively in Kansas City against Drake. They had two guys that went off of us. One was a really good shooter, and we didn't defend him the way we needed to defend him. And I thought that was the difference in the game. When offensively, it's like, dude, just execute the defensive game plan, and that's it. And I think if we can focus in on that, then we'll be fine.
Yeah, that's a good point. Utah, I know all the focus right now is on BYU, but we won't have another show until then. What sticks out about the Utes?
Yeah, and so both of these teams, BYU and Utah, neither one of them have a significant conference win. Beating us would be probably their biggest win in conference. I think BYU, they did beat Baylor in overtime, and Utah, their biggest win is against BYU in overtime. So neither one of them have beaten one of the top 5 teams in the conference. They're both 0-3 against the top 5, which is Houston, Arizona, Texas Tech, Iowa State, and KU. So for Utah, we got to make sure that we don't allow them to get their most significant win in the conference against us. They have a guy in Gabe Matson who shoots the ball from the outside. He's a high volume guy. He's made the second most threes in the Big 12, right behind Brendan Hausen. So Hausen has made 71. Gabe has made 70. Now he's shot it about 50 more times or attempts than what Hausen has. But he's their go-to guy. He averages 15 a game. So look for us to try to neutralize him and then be really aggressive on him. I think it's a game that if we play really well, we should be able to shut them down. I think they will struggle scoring the basketball against our defense, if we come out with the right mindset, and so we're definitely going to have to do that. And then I think we're going to have to rebound the basketball as well. And so anytime you have high volume shooters, that means they miss a lot of shots, right? They're going to make some, they're going to take a lot. And so we got to make sure that we hold them to one and done and then get out on the other end and push the ball in transition.
Conventional wisdom might tell you, hey, 1-1, just go win on one of these road games and you're happy. But with the way K-State's playing right now and the sense of urgency needed to keep improving that resume, if it wants to get alive in that bubble talk in March Madness, you kind of have to go win both of these. Is that kind of the way that, I don't know 6 games ago that we would be saying this now, but I think you got to view this, Clint, as you got to go win them both.
I say this, you got to go win one, and that's the BYU game. And then after you win that game, then you got to go win one, and then that's the Utah game, right? And so, you win both of these games, puts us at a really good spot in the conference at 9-6, with obviously some significant wins that we've had. And as you mentioned, with the favorable matchups down the stretch, and so if we can get both of these, go 1-0, like I said, our team right now, just focus on BYU, go 1-0. And then once that's over, hey, let's go eat dinner. Let's go get a good night's sleep. Let's get some practice in. Let's get some scouting report in. And let's go 1-0 against Utah, right? And so hopefully our team can focus on that and do that.
Win or lose, we'll be back here next Friday on the shoot around again. Kansas State coming up on Saturday, plays at BYU. Should be a fun, hostile environment. And then Utah on Monday. I'll be out there providing all the coverage on Go Power Cat. Clint, will talk to you next Friday.
Sounds good.
Thank you for watching the Friday Shoot-Around, sponsored by Riverbank Brewing. This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production.